Good day, everybody. My name is Philip Lahila-Walter, Senior Officer for Biodiversity and Green Infrastructures. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all, speakers, panelists, and attendees, on behalf of ICLEI Cities Biodiversity Center to the session, Cities with Nature Supports Local Governments in the Climate Emergency with Nature-Based Solutions, or NBS for short. This session is part of the 4th edition of Daring Cities and is being organized around the theme, A Just and Equitable Climate Emergency Response, which seeks to empower urban decision makers to lead the response to the climate emergency with a focus on how to ensure this response also supports the just transition. Before we start the webinar, I just need to cover a few of housekeeping items. All participants will remain muted during the webinar, and please put your questions in the chat box so speakers can respond to you. Please also note that the webinar is being recorded and that by participating in the webinar, you give consent to be recorded. We will have time for questions, so please post your questions in the chat box, which you will find on the bottom of your screen. If possible, please type the name of the speaker that you would like to direct your question to so that speakers can respond directly or we can direct the question to them accordingly. Today's webinar includes an insightful presentation of Cities with Nature, a partnership initiative where cities can learn from each other, 2 case studies on how nature-based solutions can address the climate emergency, followed by an engaging discussions with live Q&A. I would now like to welcome Ms. Coetzee, who will introduce Cities with Nature, a partnership initiative that recognizes and enhances the value of nature in and around cities across the world. Ingrid, please take it away.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thanks, Philip. And I'm just trying to get this presentation. There you are. I hope everybody can see my screen. Okay, so I'm going to just introduce Cities with Nature and Regions with Nature as platforms. And the important thing to understand here is that, contrary to what many people may think, this is not an ICLEI-only initiative. It is, in fact, a partnership initiative. And the founding partners were ICLEI, the IUCN, and the Nature Conservancy. We've subsequently got a whole lot more partners, WWF, UNEP, just to mention a few. I think we're in the order of around about 20 partners. And the whole idea of Cities with Nature and its sister platform, Regions with Nature, is to provide an online open platform where cities can connect, where they can share, where they can learn from each other, and where they can inspire each other to global, sort of local action for biodiversity. And it was something that arose from a need that had been identified by cities and regions around the world. And it was developed together with cities and in delivering this platform. Where we are today, it's really a growing network. We launched it at the ICLEI World Congress in 2018, so it's a pre-COVID platform. And it's been really interesting to see how it's grown throughout this time of COVID. We're around about 295 cities and regions from 70 countries around the world. And there you are, it's 25 plus partners. The other thing that I just want to say, which is really important, and this is something that many people don't know, and we get asked this question, you know, from cities and regions, but what is the benefit in joining or signing up, which incidentally is a free of charge platform. There's no cost involved. It's really that it recognizes, it brings cities and regions into the global arena. The platform is recognized in a Convention on Biological Diversity decision that was adopted last year at Montreal, COP15. It's called Decision 1512. And it's about, engagement with cities and subnational governments to enhance the implementation of the new global biodiversity framework. And it includes in it a plan of action. And that plan of action has 7 various areas of action. One of them is about monitoring and reporting. And it is there that the platform is recognized as the place where cities and regions should report on and track progress against their commitments to contributing to the global biodiversity framework, as well as national biodiversity strategies and action plans. And there are many ways in which cities can engage with this platform. There's an opportunity to build a city profile so that cities around the world can see what your city is about. We can, share and report your actions on the action platform, and I'll get back to that a little bit later. We have various tools. One of the sort of most prominent tools is a digitized version of the City Biodiversity Index, which is a self-assessment tool that takes cities around assessing the status of their biodiversity and how they can set targets for themselves. There's also the nature pathway, and it follows the ICLEI methodology of assess, act, and accelerate. And this is really a journey that cities can go on, and they can hop on and off this pathway at any time. As I mentioned, there are lots of tools and resources. We are starting what we call communities of practice. There's already one, and I'll show you a little bit more about that later. And there are many, many informative guides on the platform as well. And all of this, as I said, for free. So the tools and resources, this is a database which is categorized into different sort of themes based on the sorts of uses and needs that cities and regions have. And there are cutting-edge tools and guidelines on things like nature-based solutions, ecosystem restoration, et cetera, et cetera. And what we do is we gather these as we become aware of them, we gather them and we upload them onto the data tools and resources database. But we also encourage cities where they have developed tools, and there are many such cases, to upload them onto the database so that we can share those tools and resources with other cities and regions around the world. The communities of practice is a really interesting one, because this is where it becomes a whole lot more than just a website. It's more interactive, and it's really around a space where cities can virtually connect and discuss around innovative approaches, learning from each other, sharing best practices. We have developed one so far, which is on coasts, cities and coasts, oceans and coasts. And there are several others in the pipeline. We're engaged in discussions with UNEP and the FAO to develop one on ecosystem restoration, which of course is a very topical thing in this decade on ecosystem restoration. And there's a lot of good practice that's happening, but there are also many questions that cities and regions have on this topic. Here you can see some of the guides that we have included. For example, the one on the left-hand side, we are particularly proud of, the light pollution guide. This is a guide where we collaborated with the Commission, the Convention on Migratory Species, to develop this guide. And it's been amazing to see the response to the guide. For example, in Maui County in the US, they have a bylaw around light pollution, and there are many, many other examples as well. And then you can see there are just some more examples there that we've listed so far. This is just to give you an idea. So we talked about the action platform, and this is really probably one of the most important functionalities of this platform, because it's linked directly to the Global Biodiversity Framework. And what we've done is to take the 23 action targets from this framework and interpret it in a way that makes sense and applies to the mandates and the powers that cities have. We're busy developing one also now for regions with nature. And as I mentioned, this is recognized by the convention and the parties in that decision. And what we do is we realize that cities have different capacities, there are different sizes, different priorities. So we're not sort of pitching it at the same level as the global or even the national targets, and we're giving them an option, because these are voluntary commitments. And so we give cities the option. They can just choose a wide action area, and if that's all they have capacity for to commit, that's fine. If they want to go down into the next level, make a commitment, that's also good. or, you know, further down, take specific actions and set targets. So it's a really customized tool and platform for cities. And we're already very proud to say that we have, I think it's about 240 commitments that have been made globally. And we've only, I mean, we're in the process of encouraging and recruiting cities to make some more commitments. I was in a discussion this morning with a city in Australia, and we do support cities who are interested in this. And for example, so far we've got engagement of, I think it's just under 30 cities, but increasingly every day we're seeing more and more cities. And I want to make one comment about the action platform is we don't expect cities to make a new or different commitment. In the meeting that we had this morning, for example, the council member was telling me they are starting or they're working on their climate action plan, and they had made a decision to include nature into their climate action plan. And I said to her, well, that's exactly the sort of commitment that we would like to see, because there's a target that talks to the link between biodiversity and climate. There are many cities that have local biodiversity strategies and action plans, or cities that are doing something around eradicating invasive species, or addressing pollution and effluent in terms of the impact it has on rivers, the restoration of wetlands. There's a number of things, and these are the sorts of things that can and should go into this action platform. So I really want to do a call here today and encourage as many cities possible to make those commitments. We have a city here today, Montreal and Cape Town, and I'm very proud to say that both of those are cities that have started making those commitments. And remember, this brings you and this profiles you onto the global platform. We're going to use this information at the next COP to profile what cities have already pledged to do, or what they are already doing, and showing the progress so that the world out there can see the amazing work that they're doing. And we're going to engage with the parties as well as how we can use this information to capture it into the national reports. These are just some of the amazing stories. The city of Montreal, we're very proud to say that the mayor of Montreal, Valérie Plante, has played a really prominent role in pushing the whole biodiversity through, work with ICLEI as global ambassador. But also specifically when we had the summit there, the 7th Summit of Cities and Subnational Governments last year, obviously being the host city, she was a really important person there in guiding and engaging with cities and making sure that their voices are heard. And then just another one, some of the other success stories very near to Montreal, the city of Quebec, where they're doing some incredible work around the Lake Saint-Pierre, which is a wetland. It has been classified both as a UNESCO biosphere reserve, but also a Ramsar site. And it looks at how one can establish sustainable agriculture in that area, but also protecting the lake's very sensitive ecosystems. And it's really great to see how there's been a collaboration between government and between the farmers and the academic sector. And this one is really a good example of how one can do through a collaborative approach, including the local governments, as well as the subnational government, and as well as the local, the indigenous communities in taking action and making a difference on the ground. The other example is from Brazil, the city of Niterói. They are focusing, doing great work also in terms of ecological restoration and how it addresses the point of social inclusion, looking at different vegetation in the Atlantic forest area within the municipality. And it's diverse because it addresses from mangroves, coastal islands, to forests, to sandbanks, but also making sure that the local communities and the residents' associations are involved so that there's ownership at the local level, very much in the same way that the Lake Saint-Pierre example from Quebec has. And I'm going to end here because I want to hand over to my next two speakers who are from cities themselves. So they will be sharing more of their stories. These are just some of the contact names for your purposes if you want to get hold of us, and we will share these in the chat box. And with that, I hand back to you. Thank you so much, Philip.
Yeah, thanks so much for you, Ingrid. It's so important that we tell these stories, these success stories that the cities are creating around the world, and Cities with Nature is really a perfect place to bring all these stories together and tell like a holistic story overall about the major contributions that cities are making. We will now proceed to hear how cities are addressing the climate emergency through NBS and sharing these experiences in Cities with Nature. I would like to introduce Mr. Bongani Manisi. He's the manager of environmental planning and sustainability in the city of Cape Town in South Africa. And really pleased to have you here, Bongani, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Philip, and good afternoon to our panelists and to the participants across the world. Yes, so pleased to be here this afternoon to share this, nature-based solutions case studies from Cape Town. I have 5 minutes and I'll try to run through these slides. I basically have just a couple of pictures that I will share with you and share a bit of narrative around that. I think we all know sitting here today that nature is able to fight nature. You can't protect yourself if you continue to work against it. And you can see right here with the infrastructure that is projected on the slides, with buildings being consumed, road infrastructure, and no matter what you do, no matter what equipment you bring, nature just keep fighting, and in the end, nature wins until you succumb to the fact that you have to work with it and you have to recognize its sovereignty in the space. And Cape Town has done, this particular intervention where they, instead of trying to use machinery, they implemented a net system. In other words, putting up nets. With these nets, you're able to capture the sand, and we planted various species, specific species on the dunes, and that species were then, protected. And you'll understand that what happens, particularly on the beaches, is that when there are disturbances elsewhere, for instance, with the building of the harbor right here, you may find that there's been a disturbance. The currency, the water in here is not able to move as it used to. The sand is not able to deposit itself. So when that happens, it exposes some of these areas, and hence using nature-based solutions like this one started to give us some results and give us hope in Cape Town. But let me just also say that what we like about nature-based solutions is that not only are you able to protect yourself from natural disasters, but you're also able to create green jobs. So in Cape Town, we combine this very well in that we are creating skills, enabling people to enter into the green economy. And you can see with the next slide the results from that, basically it sort of restored itself. But I mean, obviously, this give it time, we see what will happen. Ingrid spoke earlier on about the use and the importance of clearing invasive alien species. And we've partnered with the Nature Conservancy in Cape Town in the Great Cape Town Water Fund to clear invasive species. We've invested over 60 million rands over a couple of years. And we know that, through the invasive species, we're losing 55 billion liters of water, which is approximately 2 months worth of water for Cape Town. And just by simply removing this invasive species, you're increasing yield within your catchments, and you really don't have to do much, but simply just cutting the invasive species, you start to see your rivers flowing much better than they used before. So the aim is to clear 54,000 hectares, not only within Cape Town itself, but outside of Cape Town. One would understand that those that have been in Cape Town, our catchments are largely outside of Cape Town city center itself. So by clearing outside those areas, we're able to, prepare the rivers flowing into the dams, feeding water into the city. And of course, this will ensure that we've got a sustainable water supply for the future demands in Cape Town. Just, I think, for the sake of time, Ingrid and Philip, I'll leave it right here. I shared with the participants today the use of nature-based solutions to manage the dune system, ecosystem dune, systems, but then also sharing the importance and the value of clearing invasive species in this case. Thank you very much. I'll take questions later.
Yeah, thanks so much, Bongani. This was super inspiring. It's always really great to hear about the amazing work that you're doing in Cape Town. Thanks so much for being here and for telling your story.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Next up is Mr. Jeremy Waters. He is head of the Strategy and Development Division of the Large Parks Network in the City of Montreal, Canada. Jeremy, we're very happy to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us today, and please take it away.
Hi, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here today, even if on my side of the ocean, it's still a little bit early, but it's a real pleasure. So almost 1 year ago, lots of people were in Montreal for the COP15. So it's just a continuation of the work that we started. And I'm really proud to be here today to show you an example of a concrete action that the City of Montreal is working on. So, as you know, Montreal is the seat of the UN Secretary of the Convention on Biodiversity since 25 years. So the city is working on biodiversity topics since many, many, many years. And we work with lots of partners as well. So in my service, the Great Park Service, we got lots of biologists, lots of people working with on the urban forest and invasive species, for example. So in 2021, the Nature and Sport Plan was launched. It is based on the Montreal 2030 strategic plan. That is a plan for the whole city, and its commitment to accelerate ecological transition. The Nature and Sport Plan has four main components: Green Montreal, Blue Montreal, Montreal's Mountain, and Active Montreal. Generally speaking, the Nature Sport Plan aims to enhance the city's large park and sport facilities. And it set out tangible action to increase green and blue areas, protect ecosystems and biodiversity, and promote a healthy and active lifestyle to the population. The Nature and Sport Plan is perfectly in line with the Global Biodiversity Framework's Target 12, regarding the increase of size and accessibility of green and blue areas in cities to enhance health and well-being. As you can see, we mix protecting biodiversity with an active lifestyle. So what we want is the citizen to have access to green space, to be more active, and it's a principle of well-being for the population. One of the main projects of the Nature and Sport Plan, the map that you see, it's Montreal Island. So you got lots of great parks. But today we were going to focus on one project, which is the Grand Parc de l'Ouest. So the main traduction would be the Great West Part. So it's in the west part of the city of Montreal. As you can see, it's a huge park. To give you a scale, it's 3,000 acres. So the diversity of ecosystem makes it a rich environment. Keep in mind that it's only 30 minutes car ride from downtown. So it's quite unique to have that in a city that is quite dense. So it's a mosaic of ecosystem. You got woodland, wetlands, agricultural lands, and fallows. So there's lots of species that we're protecting there, and lots of different plants as well. The creation of the Grand Parc de l'Ouest was also largely supported by the population. There was a public consultation in 2020 aiming to define a collective vision for the park. We received thousands of contributions. Respect of nature came out as the most important value for people, followed by accessibility, which is kind of interesting when you get that data and that feedback from the population. They were the two most important values for the population. So we start to work with that. The Grand Parc de l'Ouest is also home to agricultural lands, and we want to enhance biological and innovative agriculture to combat food insecurity in the city. There were important floods a few years ago, so in 2017 and 2019 in Montreal. Many citizens living in the western part of the island were affected. They've seen this problem firsthand. Shoreline rehabilitation on public land, namely in the Grand Parc, is one of the ways in which the city is acting to increase the resilience. And the Grand Parc de l'Ouest, as I say, ultimately will become a park that will be 3,000 acres. So we're still acquiring land and building the park. And we aim to make it the largest municipal park in Canada. So we have very strong ambition for a collective park. Just so you know, that's a recent project that we did in the park. So it's a bridge on that is crossing a wetland. So when we work in this kind of area, we are very sensible of the habitat of the species that are there. So every part of that bridge we're bringing in helicopter, so we didn't destroy the nature. So it's an example. So in that wetland, you can see beavers, you can see many species. So it's just an example of how we work there. So thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jeremy. That was short and sweet and very inspiring indeed as well. Yeah, I saw that there are a couple of questions that came in. We are now at the Q&A session. Thanks again for our great speakers here to give a quick input. And let's launch straight into the questions. I see there are two, and here again the call and all the participants, feel free to add your questions here, and we'll do our best to address them. So maybe a first question for Bongani. Can you explain how AIPs create a loss in water? Is a question that Shannon posed here.
That's the invasive species, is that right? Yeah, that's right. Thank you very much for the question. I think one question that, or rather the response is that many species, particularly what we know is that a fully grown eucalyptus species or tree can consume at least 1,000 liters or more of water per day. And this, goes, the same for Jackson willow, Acacia mansi, and that. So, the root system goes very deep into the water table, and is able to obstruct water even in areas where other species, particularly local species, are not able to obstruct, and therefore depleting the aquifer recharge system. And when the aquifers are depleted, it affects the actual natural water flow into the various catchments, including rivers and so on. It sounds like a very simple answer, but this is the feedback we're getting from various scientific studies done around these particular species.
Thanks a lot, Bongani. The next question here is directed at Jeremy from Dipanjana. I hope I pronounced that name correctly. How is the private land being acquired in this 3,000 hectare park? What kind of mechanisms are being used to take private landowners on board?
That's
Really
thank you for the question. That's a really great question, and there's many ways. So we acquire land. That's a part of my job. So we go see owner and we propose money. That's a simple thing, but you have to have the money. And sometimes there's owner that they just don't want. They're not ready. They still think they're gonna develop their land. So we wait. But there's part 2 in that park that are under McGill University control. So we include these parts in the park, and we don't want to acquire McGill University land. So it's more to sign convention with them and put them in board. So one of the principles of the Great Park, it's we always put it as a collective park. So for Montreal, it's quite new to work that way. So we want to rethink how we create park and protect land in the city. So we're not in the 200 years ago where you got a homestead that come with a plan and make Central Park, and it's a big park, city park, and that's it. It's a new way of creating park and protecting land that we're trying.
Thanks so much, Jeremy. What I hear there is that you're going for a more collaborative approach than increasing your jurisdiction, but rather like collaborating and getting private landowners on board. That's great to hear. Another question I see here is for Bongani. Can you explain how reducing invasive species, especially those competing of trees for water? I'm not sure if I understand this correctly, but I think you already touched on that question before.
Yeah, I saw the question. I was trying to type a response back just to save time. Look, I think it's very tricky. I mean, for instance, in Cape Town, we've got various vegetation type. You know, your Cape Flat Sand. And then we've got Strandveld, and these are deep sands. And then you've got mountain fynbos as well. But what happens is we try to remove the invasive species either manually for bigger trees, and we also try and introduce where, for instance, where we find that there's a bigger, dense population of in the invasive species, like Port Jackson, for instance, we try and introduce a biological control. But you must understand that with a biological control, you need to keep it there for a longer period of time. Otherwise, if you cut down the species or there's a fire, the actual bugs, they do disappear. So they need to be there for a bit of time until the species die out. We also use manual labor as well. But what's very interesting in Cape Town is that we work with various institutions, particularly University of Stellenbosch, to try and see what methods work best, whether it's best for us to clear and leave the species there and see whether the fynbos come back. And I think that's your question, to say, how do you protect, of course, the plants that can compete, right? To see whether by leaving it there, the fynbos, does it come naturally, or do you have to burn, you have to cut and burn, or do you have to cut, to remove, and introduce indigenous seeds and so on? We've tested these various methods, and they seem to be working differently, and results are differently, unfortunately, in various circumstances. But I can tell you what, invasive alien species need to be fought, and to be fought aggressively. But we do so while creating jobs and while creating PhDs and masters, because I think while we're removing them, we need to also understand them in order to better respond. I hope I'm touching on many of those questions. We don't have time. Najmo, I hope I answered you there.
No, this
Philip,
is perfect. Ingrid, do you want to come in here too?
Yeah, I want to come in, and I think, I mean, Bongani is talking about a very, very important thing. I'm glad he talked about the job creation, but I think that maybe what many people don't realize is the role that fire plays in the fynbos biome, that we need, we need to have fire for the regeneration purposes. So it's not that we are burning and creating a smoke pollution problem. It's part of the natural cycle of the fynbos. And it's really absolutely incredible to see the work that has been done. People don't understand we're a water scarce country. And if you have a species like the eucalyptus that takes up so much water, how rivers have run dry. And now through the years of this process of clearing invasive species, how that water yield, as Bongani says, has started to resurface again. But it is right. It's an aggressive thing, and it's an ongoing thing. That maintenance that he was referring to is very, very important.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Ingrid and Bongani again. There's one question still open here, and I want to modify that a little bit or broaden it a little bit. So it says here, NBS faces survival challenges due to conventional development. How can carbon credits be used to recognize nature-based solutions as assets, and how nature can become price competitive? And I want to broaden that a little bit by basically asking the question, nature-based solutions do have sometimes there is an image that nature-based solutions can be quite expensive or logistically challenging. And I just wondered if our city representatives here can touch on their experience regarding financing, including innovative financing like carbon credits. And maybe Ingrid, you could add then afterwards regarding kind of the bigger picture regarding financing where you're involved in your position. Jeremy, do you want to start and then maybe hand it over to Bongani?
Yeah, we work on different fronts on invasive species as well. For example, we got the emerald ash borer in North America. It's a really, really big problem, especially when you've got a city which have 25% of ash tree as the main tree. So it's really important to fight it, and I cannot be more agreeing with Bongani that we have to fight it aggressively. So we do so. For the financing, our model, it's not based on carbon credit. It's based on partnership, mainly with different the region government. So it's the CMM. For example, for acquisition I was talking about, so they finance us in part, and the federal and provincial government they implement program as well that we are able to to go and get some money in these programs. So that's the way that we finance most of our action. That being said, after it's political choice to put money less or more in the envelope that give us the money we need to do what we're doing. So I think a big part of the of the financing comes from political willingness.
Yeah, sure. Jeremy, you're quite correct. I mean, I agree. Similarly with Cape Town, we rely on partnerships with the national government. But also we've seen quite lately, I mean, of course, in my presentation, I did highlight that we're working with the Nature Conservancy as well. So you can see that international funding come in handy. And I think this leads on to the point that I want to make now is that we're currently busy with AFD funding on the C40 funding, for instance. But what's very interesting there is that we're getting funding to package various work packages to try and work in the livable urban water way spaces. What's important there is that we've learned as a city that when we need to manage rivers, be it managing it for alien invasive species, pollution, and so on, you need to manage it from the source to sea. And I think in doing so, you need to combine both your brown and green infrastructure there, but also restoring tourism in that space, recreation, and as well as restoring pride for the various urban spaces in the city. So that's what this funding is currently helping us. After that, then we'll be able to see whether we can either get funding from them or the city itself will allocate budget to be able to make those identified projects, to be implemented. But funding has become very dry lately. But some people will say things, they would say otherwise. There's lots of money out there. You just need to package your projects correctly. So I think I want to latch on the latter, that as long as we've got ready packaged projects, we should still be able to obtain some international funding out there. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, both Jeremy and Bongani made some really important points. And I just want to add a few things that, the thing about the cost. So yeah, the initial layout cost is probably more than your conventional grey infrastructure solution. But I do want to add, and there was some really interesting research that was done, and they actually piloted, done by the Western Cape provincial government a few years ago, where they applied a sort of a conventional grey infrastructure solution to, let's say I think it was a wastewater treatment. And then in another area, they applied a nature-based solution, a more sustainable option. And they did the numbers, they did the number crunching on this. And what they found was that although the sort of graph in terms of initial capital outlay was a lot more expensive for the nature-based solution, if you looked at the maintenance cost, it went down considerably. And it's really it's an important factor, because in many cases, cities struggle, particularly in the global south, cities struggle with small income, sort of tax bases, and not everybody pays rates and taxes, and the rates and taxes is not necessarily enough to cover all their developmental and infrastructure costs. So often it's the most indigent communities that are affected when there's no money to restore or to maintain the wastewater treatment, or whatever the case may be. And then it is, in the long run, it is a cheaper option if you take in the whole life cycle of your infrastructure or of your plant. Something else that I want to talk about is we must remember that grey infrastructure cannot offset carbon or cannot reduce biodiversity loss. So that is a sort of a cost that hasn't been internalized, and you need to bring that into the equation. If you look at the externalities, if you look at what we're really doing here, if you have green or blue infrastructure, you're using nature-based solutions, then it has also a positive effect in terms of your offsetting your emissions or reducing biodiversity loss. I think something else that's important is that one needs to understand, there was this question about the price and the value. That's very tricky. It's always about who determines that value, and one has to be very careful. For example, in South Africa, at one stage, there was a huge hype around a plant called speckboom, which grows naturally in the Eastern Cape, and it has huge carbon sequestration possibilities. But if you plant it here in the Western Cape, as Bongani will tell you, it doesn't have the same impact because the ecosystems are different, the climates are different. So you can't put a one-price-fits-all value on a particular species. And then I think the other thing that we have to be very careful with nature-based solutions is that we look at really what is a nature-based solution. There's a lot of greenwashing out there, and we need to make sure that, and that's why the CBD talks about ecosystem-based approaches, so that there is a biodiversity gain and that the social gains are also there. And I will leave it at that. Thanks.
Yeah, Jeremy, you have another thing to say.
Yeah, I'll add the externality, the positive externality for human health of nature-based solution is often shadowed by the price of the infrastructure, or and that's crazy when you think about it, because I'm going to give an example. One of our city goal is to plant 500,000 trees for 2030. And we will get to that, I'm pretty sure, because it's going well. But the price of planting trees in city is quite expensive when you think about it. But the benefits are so evident for human health when you think that there's now drought, there's a heat wave, there's lots of crazy things happening with the climate change. So often we take that out of the equation, but we have to link that. And often to go back on financing, when you link that, it's easier to get financing, because there's more and more foundation and organization that link human health and environmental issues together. So if you package your project that way, or you give that angle, sometimes it's easier to get finance.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy, for making that connection between all the co-benefits that come along with nature-based solutions and financing, and more funders and donors really making an effort to not only look at the simple economic side, but also on the side of the other co-benefits. I see another question here from Deepanjana, and it's about indigenous groups. So they practiced control of fire very wisely in the past, or so far. Do you think management of citizens is going to help? Not quite sure what is meant by aspiration management, but I want to put this question out here for the speakers. Bongani, I see you.
Yeah. Look, I'm trying to read the question myself, and I wasn't sure exactly what. And I think if I don't get to answer it in the way that the participant wants, perhaps he can just elaborate. But I think I'm just assuming that, for instance, in Cape Town, which is rich in biodiversity, and we've got proclaimed nature reserves and that. So what we do is, because we recognize the value of fire on the type of ecosystem that we manage, is that we know precisely which felt type, how old it is, and we burn it according to a specified fire program. We've managed to really, that, for instance, a city's fire and rescue department, it's not meant to start fires, right? Their role is to go out to put out fires to save lives. But we've really managed to work with our city departments to ensure that they understand the role of fire in fynbos, and that also when fire is managed in fynbos, especially within cities, it reduces fire risk. So we are actively using fire as the indigenous people would have used it. Of course, we know that the indigenous people, they used fire to stimulate new growth, for them to know where the bulbs are. And sometimes they use it to flesh out game, and things. They've used it for various, things, or be it collection and things like that. So fire was used for a lot of things. But in a city like Cape Town, where biodiversity is rich, we really can't maintain and protect this biodiversity without fire. So we use it actively. I hope I did try and answer that question. Otherwise, please elaborate. We will try and get to it a little more.
Yeah, thanks so much, Bongani. This sounds very inspiring, how you're using fire also in a constructive way, which has often a bad reputation, especially in the citizenship, or among citizens. Sorry. Yeah, Deepanjana, if that was not the question that you had, please elaborate, as Bongani said. I want to move to another hot topic when it comes to biodiversity protection and nature-based solutions. So balancing the protection of biodiversity with urban development is often a concern. Can you discuss your city's strategies for integrating biodiversity conservation, nature-based solutions, and land use planning while accommodating the need for growth and social equity? Maybe Jeremy, maybe you can start.
I'll start with the the first thing is a good planification. The first thing that you have to have is a vision of the city you want in 50 years, in 100 years, and say you want to destroy every nature that is still there, or you want a city that is green and beautiful and that people want to live in it. So it starts with a vision. So first thing, we're redoing our urban plan for the city. So we are now in that reflection, which is kind of interesting because it's always difficult to manage the aspiration of developers versus protection of the environment. But when you set goals, so I talk about a vision, and after you have to set goals or target. We have a target, for example, to protect 10% of the land of the island for biodiversity purpose. So we're now at, let's say, I make a round number, we're at 8%, but the 2% is gonna be hard to protect. So at least we have. If you have goal, you have the tools like money, like we have the droit de préemption. I don't know the traduction for that. I'm sorry. So we can substitute the city. The city can substitute itself for the first buyer. So if there's someone that want to buy a land, the city can come and say no, for the same price and the same condition, we're taking it. So it's a way to protect land too. But it starts with a good plan and incitative. So let's say redeveloping on parking lots, redeveloping on brownfield, but it costs money as well. The contamination is an issue. So there's lots of issues that come with that, but we have to rebuild the city on itself and protect the green spaces that we still have, because many years from now, we won't have any green space anymore. So it's going to be kind of crazy. That being said, there's little things that we can do. We did a pollinator plan. So the pollinator plan has lots of action that we're implementing for favorizing pollinator in the city on private land, on public lands. So it's kind of different tool that you have to use to get through that.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jeremy, for this powerful statement, and really pointing out where this could lead to if you don't have a coherent vision that includes many aspects, including how you would like to see nature be included in your city. Bongani.
Yeah, thank you very much. Look, I think just maybe touching slightly on the new ITP for the city, which kickstarted in June 2022, July 2022 rather, is that one part of the vision of the city is to create a city of hope. And the beauty about this is that our mayor is pro biodiversity as well as, a development, as well as, integrating of social needs and so on. And I think we are proud to have a mayor like this right now in Cape Town. And I think combined with that is that the city has got what what we call the biodiversity network, which was a partnership program, with various other entities like South African National Parks, Cape Nature, and various other entities like South African National Biodiversity Institute and others. Now, this is the fabric on which development is actually taking place in Cape Town. It is a recognized tool in the Municipal Spatial Development Framework, which is part of the Integrated Development Plan. So biodiversity, almost one would say that it shapes the city, right? So we know that where you've got cities that are covered in shacks or slums as it is described in other parts of the world, it's those people do not have hope. Why I say this is that we know that when you open your door and you can see nature, or when you can drive and for some reason, less than 10 minutes, you are in the natural spaces, your life, it's really, really different. You can see, for instance, my picture right there. I mean, of course, that's a background picture, but this is taken in Signals Hill. And directly down to that, you can see Sea Point, you know, in there, the waterfront. Now, literally, I mean, in the waterfront, you can see nature. You aspire to want to go there. So the balance in Cape Town, we don't have a choice in Cape Town. We are planted in a you know, species-rich, species-diverse, you know, city in the world, right? And we know that cities are developed. In other words, they are superimposed onto the environment. Now, the recognition of that is that respect nature so that the resource nature can continue sustaining your tourism and various other activities around you and making the people want to visit your city. And I can tell you this, people visit Cape Town for many things. And one of them, it's because of the beauty of nature. Now we are in August, you know, the beauty of flowers in this world. Man, I can't say more. Yeah, thank you.
This is so good to hear from you, Bongani, and to hear your passion for nature and your love for nature and what it also does on our emotional level. It has so many benefits. Ingrid, you raised your hand.
Yeah, as a Cape Townian, I just want to say that our mountain and our sea is an integral part of our people. And the sad thing is we are a very divided city. Some of us have better access to nature than others, particularly, as Bongani said, the people that live in the informal areas, and they are often more affected by the flooding. But I do think that the city is doing a lot to try and redress this imbalance. Also working very closely with our National Parks Board to address that. But it's so, you know, we live so closely to nature here. I mean, we have caracal sightings. We have amazing raptors that we see. I live in an area where there are quite a few trees close to the mountain, and we often have jimnijis, and we have, you know, you get... we've even had whale sightings around certain parts in the southern part of the city, and small buck in the areas that are more inland. And it's true that when the mountain burns and there's a bad burn, it affects, you know, Bongani was talking about the health of people and the well-being. It affects everybody. The sort of life stops because everybody's worried about the mountain. It's not just because the mountain is there and your house starts right at the bottom. It's also, you know, we live with this fire on a regular basis. When there's a storm, it's very much in your face because it's so close to the coast. I see Bongani's hand is up. We get very emotional when we talk about nature in our city.
I can hear that. We're all very passionate about this topic. I do have a look at the clock, and we want to be mindful of everyone's schedule. So let's come to a close. But Bongani, I do want to give you a chance.
Thank you, Philip. Just to say that I'm currently doing another master's, and it purely because of the passion. And the topic is factors affecting the balancing need for biodiversity protection and city development in a growing context of socio-economic inequality in Cape Town. I'm purely saying this because of what was mentioned earlier. So I am passionate, and you know, I'm doing something about it, and of course, working together with everybody else. Thank you for the opportunity to present and talk to many people. Thank you.
I think this is a perfect place to leave it to. Like, I guess everyone can see how passionate that people are here that work in that field. I'm so glad we had you. Thank you so much, Jeremy and Bongani and Ingrid for joining us today and for sharing your experiences. And thanks for the participants for these awesome questions. Thanks for our colleagues who made all of this possible and worked in the background. This was wonderfully put together. We would like to take a moment to announce the next Daring Cities virtual forum event, which is taking place next week on the 19th of September at 5 p.m. Central European time. It's motivating action, tools and inspiration for climate change communication, and it aims to equip local leaders and sustainability staff with knowledge, tools, and inspiration to effectively communicate climate change issues to diverse audiences. You can find the registration link and more information in the chat box. And this concludes our webinar today. Thank you so much for joining, and it has been a great pleasure with you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thank you.